Hi, everybody. Thanks for choosing our session, the best session of the day. I'm George Westerman. I'm really proud and delighted to be able to host the session for the finalists from our award. You got to hear about them last night. You got to see them on panels during the day, and this is where we get to focus just on the finalists and their stories to make it happen. You know, you've been hearing this all day, that generative AI is the coolest thing ever. But in many cases, the generative AI and the opportunities available from generative AI build on doing the other stuff well to start with. And so how do you do what you're doing and continue the cloud work and continue the rollout and continue the maintenance on your systems while still doing that new stuff and keeping it secure and regulatory compliance? All of that comes up into the CIO role. It's far too hard for me to do, but we got 3 people who actually know how to do it really well, and they're gonna share their stories. So why don't we start here and go down, and if you could just each introduce yourselves and just give us a little elevator pitch on why you think you're a finalist here. Chris first.
Chris Bedi, CDIO at ServiceNow. This part doesn't come natural, like tooting my own horn, but why do I think I'm a finalist? Focusing on 3 things: dollars, employee sat, customer sat. On the dollar side, we developed and co-innovated a number of products that are driving top-line revenue for ServiceNow. On the productivity, multiple hundreds of millions of productivity delivered. But the sentiment one is actually harder to change, and that's the one I'm actually more proud of, because you can automate to get productivity. Changing people's sentiment, I think, is actually harder. On the employee sentiment, we ask our employees a question: are the processes and tools helping you do your best job ever, or some version of that? That rose 10 points in the last year. And then on the customer sat side, that score improved by about 5 points. For every point of CSAT, we calculated that's about $150 million of top-line revenue that we're gonna get. So dollars, ESAT, and CSAT for me.
So it's interesting, you know, for years we've been talking about running IT like a business, but it wasn't running it like that kind of a business, right? So is that kind of how you feel about it, that you're running a business that links into the other businesses?
Absolutely. Common goals across the enterprise, and we have a quarterly forecast of value we're gonna deliver, and just like we do for our P&L, we have a quarterly close. How did we do against it? Forecast actuals. We actually absolutely run it like that.
Fantastic, thank you. Next up is Akira Bell.
Good afternoon, Akira Bell here. I'm the CIO for a company called Mathematica. Size-wise, we're the small fry of this group of finalists, but I think that has a little to do with why I'm here, because we really did a lot of work over the last few years getting Mathematica really playing in a space above its weight class. So it was really about creating the space. So we're a company we call ourselves advocates for data and evidence. And when you have a large group of PhDs, social scientists, economists, and data scientists amplifying their subject matter expertise and the methods that they can bring to critical problems was at the core of what we needed to do. And what we needed to do over the last couple of years is ready them for this moment, when emerging technology could either be a place where they could use that as a competitive differentiator or a place where they'd be behind. And what we did was create the platforms, the data governance, the management tools, where they could standardize, where they could explore and collaborate with partners and clients and be ready for the moment we find ourselves right now.
Right. So, you know, that's hard, right? Getting people to standardize, to agree to standards, that's difficult. How did you get them to buy into this idea?
Man, I find that, you know, my title is CIO, and a long time ago I used to be a developer, and sometimes I miss those days. But this path is really been winning hearts and minds, both in a very business-minded sense, but because we're a mission-oriented company, it's really about telling the right story that helps them understand that this creates, one, digital trust, which is hugely important to us and our clients. So centering us on data trust, data security, data privacy, and data ethics, and that we are not going to do things that amplify bias or do anything that's unethical, and bringing them together that's around that story, help them buy in.
Okay, great, thank you, thank you. And last up is Fahim Siddiqui from Home Depot.
Thank you. So it's a difficult question to I would look back and say, why am I here? But it's certain ways it's easy. At the Home Depot, unlike any organization I've worked for in my 36 years of working, we're very much focused at our core values. And of those core values are really, the heart of it is taking care of our associates so that they can take care of our customers. But the customers' needs continue to evolve and expand, and as we know, retail is not the easiest of the places to be. Mm-hmm. And we talk a lot about changing the engine while keep the plane flying. I think for us, the opportunity was actually to do that one of those Transformer movie things, where it looked like this bus that all of a sudden became a robot while you were running. And that's kind of what we did. We really completed our digital transformation while growing immensely. We grew from 111 billion in revenue 5 years ago to 150 plus billion of revenue. And while conducting that, we grew our technology team by more than 50%. Wow. And kept up with the changes in the business, and were able to deliver on completing a digital transformation.
Fantastic. And there's all the technology stuff, there's the process improvement, there's the different ways of thinking about customer experiences and that kind of stuff. One of the things I remember from our interview is you talked about orange-blooded people, right? Orange being the color of Home Depot. And when you say that you went from being a truck to a tank or whatever you were, how did the orange-blooded people have to change for this?
I think from a technology perspective, our view was continue to remove that friction. I'll give you an example. We are now the largest appliance delivery and appliance selling company in North America. All of that delivery used to be done by third parties, the entire supply chain of that. During this time of COVID and beyond, we actually built 160 warehouses and brought that entire delivery in-house, while we increased customer satisfaction by 1,500 basis points. So it's about what is your new job. There was no job as delivery before, because that was just outsourced. And now it's something that we are quite proud of doing.
Great. Thank you. So I think you can hear these stories are amazing. And as they talk about it, I can't imagine how hard it was to really make happen, and how many times you were just banging your head against the wall to make this work, but you made it work, which is fascinating, right? So I wanted to talk about some of the kind of challenges and other questions and just get your impressions on them. First of all, why don't we start with Chris? The theme of our symposium is the Goldilocks paradox. How do you manage too much, too little, too tight, too loose, that kind of thing? And in AI, of course, that's especially a space that we got to worry about. So, you've been doing a lot with AI, both in your internal IT stuff, but also with the customer focus. How do you think about that Goldilocks paradox in the AI world?
So we defined what we call a dual mode approach with AI. And mode 1 is actually more easy to attain than mode 2, which I'll get to in a second. And the way that we define mode 1, it's really about incremental improvements to existing ways of working, right? Whether it's a customer support agent, could be a software engineer, could be a sales rep, could be a marketing person, could be an associate at Home Depot. Incremental improvements to existing ways of working. And I think the tech is there. By the way, I don't think the tech is the biggest challenge right now with AI. But mode 2 actually gets harder. And mode 2 would be completely starting with a blank sheet of paper and saying, if we were to start with a blank sheet of paper, what work would go the way to the machines? And what work would be left? And what interesting work could we have the humans still do? And the analogy that stuck in my head was when electricity first came to factories. The first instinct was it's a cheaper alternative to existing fuel, and let's put an electric motor in every machine, which generated productivity and things like that, similar to a lot of the McKinsey studies around how we're talking about Gen AI productivity. But it took 20 years for factories to completely reimagine themselves into what we today look at as an assembly line and take for granted. And I think the challenge for all of us leaders is, and that's what I'm calling mode 2, that 20 years. But we don't have 20 years, right? Competition is way too intense in every single industry So that's the way we're approaching it. While we're very focused on mode 1, we've delivered about 20 plus use cases. It's not a science experiment for us. It's doing the work, the equivalent of about 50 people at ServiceNow. Mode 2 is the strategy where we're putting a lot of our intellectual horsepower to say, what can that actually be?
Anybody else thoughts on the Goldilocks and AI?
Yeah, I think for us, similarly, taking an approach where, one, focus on governance. Everything's out and democratized. I think somebody else this morning already said, we can't control this moment. We cannot and don't want to be, I think that was you, Chris, that said we don't want to be the agents of no to tell everybody what they can and cannot do. But what we can do is make sure people are understanding the responsibility they have as actors and users of the tool. So one is about governing, making sure our data is ready to be used, making sure our employees understand what best practices exist as they go on and use. And then the second piece is really thinking about how we use it in terms of our core capabilities, and then how we might use it on behalf of our clients to create or amplify or change existing service offerings to our clients. And then the last part, I think you talked about really nicely this morning, which is in the defend spaces in cybersecurity. So we're looking at it both from a govern, innovation, and a defend and integrity space. That's how we're balancing.
Great, thanks.
So to relate to success we had over the last year, we had a concept where we needed our associates possibly to take pictures of our entire warehouse. Now, if you just think about it, that's a difficult ask. Can you even do that? And then be able to do vision processing on it, and with machine vision, identify where things are in overhead spaces and where they need to be stocked into, packed down. So we had to build the technology, which it was training the engines and do all of that. But then the thing was, will people do that? And that's where scale, and now we have scaled it to all our stores. But to scale it, we had to then imagine and create gamification, where people do get the points to go do it. They were not told to do it. They could compete with each other. And that was a change management process. And they get these points and they feel good about it. I don't think they translate into anything but goodwill and endorphins, I guess.
Right.
And so you have to balance the high tech of it to change management, to actual belief in it can be done. And now we get more than 4 million images, I checked, a month.
It reminds me that when Walmart introduced these robots to figure out where the stockouts were, they got rid of them again because they figured they had people running the stores filling e-commerce orders anyway. They would know where the stockouts are. And so they just had to get the people to do what they were trying to get the robots to do. It works, yeah. Okay, so next up then for Akira, data, data, data. Everything's data, and your data, right? And so, what's not getting enough attention in AI? Is it the data? Is it something else? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I think interrogation of what data you have. So I'm not a doomsdayer on this question,
Okay.
So I just want to be careful. So I know we talked a lot about data management. And yes, that is a huge concern, especially for us in looking at the data governance and understanding what you have and the integrity of that data and data cleanliness. That's a big piece. And then there's another piece around, managing for hallucinations and bias and understanding what's in your data, whose data is there, which data is there, who's underrepresented, who's overrepresented, and in which cases, and who has access to it. There was a nice roundtable question yesterday regarding what societal gaps might be created by AI. So we have to think about that so that we're not damaging the system that we're in, and we're being asked to answer questions about healthcare outcomes, and we don't want to use technology that might lead to something unintended. Right. So we really have to ask ourselves really important questions about what's in the data that's going to be trained by these LLMs. So that's the one piece. But on the other side, I also want to think about where there's opportunity and how we might better use the data. I mean, a company like ours, who we say we're about data and evidence, how can we now use this great amount of data and knowledge that we have in this moment with the AI to do better, to do more? So there's both sides.
So thank you. And then other panelists, what else is not getting enough attention in this AI space? Anybody want to add in?
So we spent years and years, and many of us still struggled with this structured data, structured content. But we've kind of figured out how to get to the right numbers. But for LLM to be really of value add in context of an enterprise, we now need our policies, our procedures, our SOPs, all this unstructured content to be curated, to be versioned, and to be something that's detailed enough to be utilized, so that when an associate looks up, how do I get rid of this lithium-ion battery, that we do provide them not a hallucination, but exact way of doing that, or you may get some sort of a fine situation. Really curating and understanding unstructured content, I think, will be a lot more difficult than we have envisioned yet. And I don't even know if we have the right tools to manage the life cycle of that, from understanding it, curating it, to absorbing it in our models.
Interesting. Gotcha. Good.
And what I would add is that as ChatGPT came out and we all became enamored with large language models, I think there's a couple things. One, there's definitely an emergence of a school of thought that says small language models are actually going to win the day. They're less parameters, but more domain specific. They consume a lot less power. In fact, OpenAI just bankrolled effectively. They just went IPO, a company to start nuclear power plants to feed their AI. So there's an argument around small language models that I don't think is getting enough attention. And then the second one is regional specific large language models. So Europe just came out with something called Aleph Alpha. It's their answer to OpenAI. It's funded by Bosch, Siemens, and SAP. And they're putting GDPR type protections around it. Japan has talked about their own LLM, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as well. So I think as these regional LLMs become more and more important to those regulated markets and different economies, what will the policymakers do in terms of interoperability of large language models, I think is an unanswered question. And then the third one I'd say is, it feels like we were all doing interesting things with machine learning, supervised and unsupervised. And when ChatGPT came out, a lot of us just skated right past ML, right? And as if it was a checked box and we had fully exploited it. So I think like that old AI, ML, and supervised, unsupervised still warrants a lot of attention, because I think there's a ton of accretive value it could create. Sorry, Akira.
No, I was just amening what you were saying, because I'm totally a believer that we haven't fully saturated the opportunity space in just the old school AI and even just automation. I don't think we've fully saturated all that we can do. And so I think this part of our jobs is to make sure that we're sense making and applying the right tools or the right combination in a lot of cases.
And
to get there.
The right stuff.
That's right.
We can't all run
That's
Gen
right.
AI. Like
That's
automation is not a solved problem.
No, it is not.
You know, it's amazing, just in the last 6 months, I've been hearing words like traditional AI and conventional AI. I'm like, wow, you know, things are different.
Old
you
school
know?
moves quick, right?
Now I'm feeling really old, yeah. But then you got me thinking, Chris, if we have these regional models, you know, I can't imagine like working at the UN, all the process and all the debate. Maybe I'll just send my LLM from my country and they can just debate all these things. Could that work?
No comment. I have no idea.
All right, so now on for Fahim. You know, I've been doing a lot of work in digital transformation. We all have, right? And AI is kind of that next step. We've had some good talks on that already. But you know, what gets lost in the digital transformation side is often the skills angle. Right, people need new skills. They need ways to grow in their careers. What have you done to help people get those skills that they need and how to grow?
So we have a technology team of more than 8,000 folks. We don't require any college degrees. Sorry, MIT. anybody can, if you have the skills, you can come work. But then how do you bridge the skills gap? So just today we had 282 or so interns start with us. Half of them came from 120 different universities. So yes, universities are relevant because we are also all remote, so we can hire anywhere. But the others all came from our stores and distribution centers. They're going to go do this internship, and if it works out, we will do another boot camp, and then they get placed in these jobs. So these folks who are making maybe $20-some an hour get a direct escalator to at least an $85,000 job. Then we created back to work, so a lot of generally women leave the workplace, take care of the family. They were probably in some nice management job. So then we created this returnship. Again, in this returnship, now we are running the third cohort of those. And then we help them really come in, get into a 6-month training / working at that level sort of a job with a coach. And then they're able to come into this middle management jobs.
These are such interesting ideas because one of the big challenges we all have is turnover, right? It's hard enough to get somebody in, but then when they leave you, you're kind of stuck. And also, or is that person you just hired, are they actually a good person to work with? Here you take somebody out of the warehouse, they're already a good person to work with. You're going to help them get a better job, and they may be more loyal if they stay there. So fascinating.
They are.
Yeah, they are. Fantastic. Good. Any other thoughts? What are you doing to develop people?
Well, similarly, I don't have a warehouse or a retail store to go to, but because we're smaller, I can't attract all the people that might want to go be at a technology company. But one of the things that we do is say, well, maybe we can hire somebody a little more junior than what we think we need and grow them and invest in them. And that's been a significant, they are more loyal if they feel like they've been invested in. That's at least what I found versus somebody who might be looking for the next big job.
Person then, do you have to give them extra mentoring, or how do you make it so they can come up to speed?
We do have to give them extra mentoring. So it's a combination of mentoring and on-the-job training, and then sometimes some classroom-based work. But for us, the stickiest employee is one that feels like we've invested in them and one that also is aligned with the mission of our company.
Great, good, thanks. Good.
So for us, very similar to the others, but one of the roles that we've taken on in my organization is back to a panel topic of AI, helping out with the AI literacy of the whole company. So we created some learning pathways. So everybody in the company had to take their AI 101. We created that, and selectively 201 and 301, because we know the future is AI, and so we have to get our whole workforce comfortable with it. We do a variety of other things that have already been mentioned, so I won't belabor them. But one of the things, back to the turnover point, biggest reason people turn over is manager, right? I think that's what the studies show. The second is just quality of work. And I think that's, again, where we as CIOs and technology leaders, through tech, we can eliminate a lot of that, what my CEO, when he's giving me my performance review, says, mind-crushing toil that you're subjecting the employees to. And I think if we can liberate them from that, I think a lot of the retention stuff starts to go away.
Well, that's a great pitch for the next session I'm doing 5 minutes after this one, which is how can generative AI improve knowledge work? So if you care about that, come down the hall.
Yeah,
we
for
can
sure.
go from there. So why don't we take some questions from the group out there? Anybody have any questions they want this team to answer? If not, I got plenty of others. No hands. Okay, let's try another question then. 3 people here. 2 are named CIO, and one's named CIO Digital. What's going on here? Should we be renaming the CIO slot to the Chief Digital Officer? Well, does digital matter, or is CIO good enough? What do you think? You got the digital, Chris, so why don't you start us here?
Yeah, in my defense. Like why? It's not because I have a massive ego that I felt I needed to add another letter to my acronym. We were in the process of, I'll call it, a cultural transformation within my own team. And the 4 or 5 core things I wanted them to really focus on, transformation, like this mindset of you own transforming our own company. You got to drive it. You're not asking permission, you're telling. Sort of take the pen. Experience, delivering insanely great experiences for our customers and employees. Third one was cyber, got to be safe while we're doing it. The fourth was AI. And there was one more I can't rattle off the top of my head. So we to kind of, as part of that change management program, we were renaming IT to DT, digital technology. And so the comms team said, well, you got to match your title to your department name. That was the origin of it. Back to your macro question, because I don't think I really got to the root of what, I actually think the title doesn't matter, but I think what matters more is that boards and the rest of the C-suite acknowledge, realize, and empower how much of the future of their companies are dependent on tech. And so whether it's CIO, CTO, CDTO, CDIO, there's a lot of different acronyms out there. The most important thing is for management teams to actually realize how much of a strategic weapon, if done right, that this role and this title can deliver for them.
So let me push back on that then. Is CIO, I've been researching now since 1997. CIO has been the title. We've had a magazine called CIO since the 80s. Is it going the way of machine learning, that's to the traditional technology leadership, and we need a new name? Or is CIO good enough? I mean, we have a branding question here too, the same question, right? So yeah.
I don't get so caught up in the name, but I would say that the role has evolved since the 80s, and we first thought of it as the place where the programmers were and the data servers were being managed. The role is now way more business leading. We've had to all evolve and be more fluent in business and financial structures and operations and everything else that goes along with growing and moving a business. So I don't know that necessarily if the title needs to change, I won't weigh in on that, but I'd certainly say how we lead and show up in spaces, both within our teams and with our peers and in boardrooms, certainly has to change.
Okay, great.
I started in a network engineering organization at Sprint, and I was pretty certain I never wanted to work for IT. I was pretty certain of that. But because we were just doing more hard technology as part of a technology team. I think now the role of the CIO, as earlier mentioned, I share with my teams, I spend my Mondays and Tuesdays help run the business and understanding the challenges of really what our major initiatives are, and certainly with an ear open to where the technology impacts or what needs to be done or what needs to be invested. But the more important metric is being that influencer, and especially when you think of retail now, I've come back to it. For years, tech, whatever you call it, digital IT tech, was thought of as an extra expense, which can maybe help save some resources. And now, the executive team, and in fact, one of our board members, I was just talking to, she writes back to my CEO, says, every company now is a tech company. And that reflects then in how much budget you get, how you get to be part of the initiatives, and how do you phase them. Because sometimes just the phasing of the initiative, that's important for IT to be successful. So those are the conversations we need to have, besides, by the way, doing the other job, which is getting the technology done.
First year with Mathematica, I remember sitting down with our CEO and just putting out what I thought was a tech strategy. And he says, that's not a tech strategy, that's my business strategy. I said, well, then we agree. We're good. But I think over time, those lines have blurred as companies evolve to be tech companies. So our job is to be very much in alignment with the business strategy.
Yeah, I agree. The tech strategy is absolutely the business strategy. And one thing I would say, George, which does need to go the way of the dodo bird, not our titles, regardless of the permutation of it, but this IT as a percentage of revenue being,
Oh my
being
gosh.
the sole metric
Yes.
versus it's a metric, just like you look at sales as a percentage of operating expense, but more importantly, what is the contribution to
The
top line?
value.
And I think it's, instead of being the first, maybe make it the last.
Well, it's such a fascinating thing because if you're actually doing really well in IT, you want to pump that number up and you want to spend more. But then you look bad on the metrics.
Yeah.
If you're looking at
If you're
that
looking at
metric.
only that measure,
Yeah,
right?
and I think I was talking to somebody earlier today. It's like, so there's one part of our jobs that is about operations, and that's the part that we should be always scaling and making more efficient.
Totally
But
agree.
there's another huge portion of our business that's driving growth and creating new services, and the right metric isn't cost as percentage. It's how are you driving value? What's the return on that?
Okay. So does that say then, just like in most companies, you've got product development and you've got the manufacturing and supply chain, those are different groups. Do we need to start doing that to IT? Splitting those groups
Some
up?
companies do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Split what?
What's that?
Operations from products. That's what,
Yeah,
that's what
the
I think
two
some
different
companies do
leaders.
separate
I'm not
those,
sure
yeah.
that one needs to split them, but for sure the way one needs to manage them is a little bit different.
Sure.
Right? Just like any managing other multiple departments underneath one roof.
Yeah.
I would not advocate splitting, I'm sorry.
Well, I just think even there's evolution. I think that eventually infrastructure will get subsumed by cyber. As we move more and more into the cloud, all the challenges of infra, except for maybe part of networking, maybe if that, really get subsumed by what we do in cyber. These jobs will change and evolve, and that's what we have to keep an eye out for.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't
So
know
we
if I
gotta-
agree
oh.
with that. Oh, no problem.
Well, no, go
We
ahead,
have to
fight. Go do your argument. We'll find out,
I
yeah.
So I see your point, though, because the cloud piece and the security piece are so intrinsically involved, but I also think there's a portion that is about creating, especially now, at least for my company,
Sure.
computing and cloud computing. It's not separate from cybersecurity, but I wouldn't see it being subsumed by cybersecurity.
That
Well,
was
that
a
sounds like-
controversial statement.
I don't know.
That sounds like a great choice for a panel for next year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because so we did our our cloud journey, and then we did an evaluation, and all the challenges that we had were around cyber for cloud.
Okay.
And now my concern is next thing we're going to have is cyber for AI that we discussed earlier in the
Yeah.
morning, and are we prepared for it?
So does that mean that these things get subsumed by cyber, or does that mean that we have to like really evangelize cyber within all of our different types of technology? I don't know.
Regardless of that, that becomes part of your and my job to figure
It
out.
sure is.
Great. So we have a question out there. Ray, you got a question?
Yeah.
So I'm Pat here.
You're what?
Because I was an enterprise architect for 14 years, and then I heard at lunch somebody said, oh, enterprise architecture, that's passé, that's gone. It's the way of the dodo bird, right? And so I wonder, does enterprise architecture, what role does that play in AI, right? We don't want silos of AI. We want reusable AI. We want consistent data definitions. Are you guys finding challenges with reusable, consistent definitions of AI, data, whatever? Is that something you guys are thinking about, pursuing? Just comment on, is enterprise architecture, and by the way, is enterprise architecture gone?
I don't think enterprise architecture is gone, and I think the gentleman from McKinsey just did the hard lessons, and I'm pretty sure reusability was one of them, and there was another one that was more also about rationalizing that portfolio. I don't remember the words exactly, but that's the job of a solution architect or an enterprise architect, and that's still, I think, very necessary.
I would agree with that. I don't think, the purpose of enterprise architecture is to, I'll call it, minimize the risk of unmanaged chaos.
That's right.
Right, which can happen. And I think the questions, however, with AI that are new is, how am I going to consume large language models or small language models? What should I do on open source because it's a competitive advantage? What should I consume through SaaS platforms like ours? How should I manage regional LLMs and data protection? How do I manage the cyber threat? Those are the new questions that need to be answered, but I still think there's a purpose to it. Fahim, what do you think?
If you come to my office, you'll be really encouraged. It's pasted with enterprise architecture flows, both my office itself and my conference room.
All right, so Jeannie Ross used to be a great partner of ours for the Symposium at Scissor. She was the champion of enterprise architecture. She wrote a book, but I heard she retired, so I don't know what we do. But,
Well, she was passé, I guess.
let's get her back.
Jeannie Ross was a phenomenal researcher, a good friend, so yeah.
Let's get her a returnship, and she can come back and do enterprise
But-
architecture.
works.
But
again.
we had to do this one thing. We had to challenge our people to create some common knowledge bases, because otherwise people run off and they'll create a model, and then it doesn't link with anything else, and then what do you do with it?
It gives a different answer or uses the same
So-
data to give a different answer.
So that we are putting a significant effort in.
Thank you.
I do think one thing that's perhaps emerging with AI, just like we've treated code repositories as an asset, this piece of software is an asset, increasingly, and perhaps others are already there, for each unique model that you're developing. Treating that like an asset, just like you would any other IT asset. What is the cyber posture? How is it performing? What's the efficacy of it? Is it running when it should? And all those kinds of things. And I think that's also an emerging practice that I would highly recommend.
So we have time for one more question. Anybody have another question here? Over here. Just shout it out.
Chris, Rowan with Synoptic. Chris, you talked a little bit about educational curriculums within your firm for AI 101, 201, and I'm sure Akira and Bedi have something similar. If you could give us a little bit of background on how you created that and sort of who gets to participate and how you make those decisions and what's involved in it, that'd be interesting.
Okay, so the question's about these AI for everybody curricula, and how did you create them? What's in them? Who takes them?
Right, so my data and analytics team, which spearheads all of our AI efforts company-wide, they created them to answer the who did it. They did it in partnership with our HR organization and our overall talent development organization, because it had to link into other corporate-wide messages that we were giving our employees. Some of it we wrote ourselves because we wanted to make it specific to our company and tie it to our core mission and things like that. Like, why is AI important for ServiceNow? But it was a combination of stuff that we wrote ourselves, largely my team. And then we also, part of the learning path was they sourced what they thought were the best material that might be available on Coursera or similar places. And that was part of the learning path for them. But that was the short answer.
Yeah, we're actually in the process of curating our for everybody type of learning, but we are looking to leverage some of the stuff that's out there already, plus getting some influence from our existing technicians and data scientists.
Is this, you're not trying to get everybody to be a coder, right? So
No, this
what are
is
you
like
trying to get them to know?
101. Just, it's basic understanding of what it is. So one of the things I want them to understand is what's the difference between generative AI and old school AI and automation. I mean, so people are using the term AI really loosely right now. One side of me wants to kind of just take advantage of the excitement in the system at this moment. So there's that, but I also want them to be better literate citizens, so understand what the technology is, what it does, what it doesn't do, what are the risks, what are the best practices for them to engage, what are safe practices, what are practices that breach confidentiality or privacy issues, the things that make them healthy citizens of our company.
Thanks.
We curated more than 175 use cases across the organization that can be AI and or Gen AI influenced. And then the important thing became how to create the specific awareness on how to manage a project like that to completion. We saw some of the instances where somebody will put together an interesting prototype and then it went nowhere because it couldn't scale. So creating that ML ops pipeline and helping folks to make that jump from citizen-based AI usage to at scale integration is where we have put our effort in.
Fantastic. So we have like 1 minute to go, and I gave a hard job to each of the panelists to finish out the panel. And it's just this one. In 5 words or less, what's one piece of advice you would give to a junior IT person who wants to move up to be the kind of CIO and do the kind of things you're doing? So 5 words or less. So let's start here and move down, okay? Go ahead.
Your word is your bond. Deliver on your commitments.
That was 10, but 5. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, go ahead.
Eliminate your job.
Eliminate your job. Okay. 2 more words you can use if you want.
I'll stick with I think. Learn how tech can help your business.
I think you used those 2 words. Okay, we're all set. So thank you for sharing your stories. I hope you got as much out of this, everybody, as I did.